Dude, last time we spoke was just before the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
That was, you had me on your podcast and we talked about it. And you're like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
And we're like, nah, everything's super chill. Because the Ukrainians themselves didn't fucking believe it.
Yeah.
I've actually had friends that work in the military and they're like, oh, super unlikely. The West just blowing it up.
Well,
look at us.
They were pretty ready.
The Russians, you mean? Or?
No, the Ukrainians. I will say this, when you start off with your first clip, the Russian invasion of Ukraine will go down as the dumbest land invasion in the last 500 years. Like literally, like it's in the end, they will lose more people. It's going to be an utter and complete disaster for Russia because a couple of things. You remember when you and I were having this discussion, Russia was telling everyone they weren't going to invade. So will anyone ever do business with Russia again? Do you any country ever trust Russia again? Number one. Number two, you're in Helsinki right now, right?
Yeah.
You know what Helsinki has? F-35s because they joined NATO. And Russia said, if you join NATO, we're going to nuke you. And they didn't do that.
They didn't
back
Who knows
up.
if their damn nukes even still work?
That I don't think they work at all. That's it. That's the other thing I've said is that. We're going to get really nerdy here. Tritium, which is one of the elements that is used to detonate a nuclear device.
Yeah.
It shrinks its half-life. It loses its mass 5% every year. That's incredibly expensive and extremely unique skill set in order to be able to redo that. And Russia has the GDP of Mexico. Let me say that one more time. Russia and Mexico have the same GDP. You know about Mexico's nuclear arsenal, right? You know all about that? Mexico's no. I'm sorry. People just don't. Their Sukhoi 57s don't work. Their tanks are getting blown up. And when you look at it now, normally when you have an invading force and you have an incumbent force like Ukraine, they're going to have an advantage because they're entrenched. Does that make sense? When you're fighting on your home turf,
you need to outnumber by 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. So because of supply lines, it's going to make it progressively more and more difficult for you to invade. And so that's one of the other issues has. But in the end, what's going to happen is like there's only 3 countries that are going to do business with Russia after this is over, which is South Africa, India, and China, and they are going to destroy Russia's economy because of what happened here. Because it's not.
How are they going to destroy their?
Because no other countries want to do business with Russia as long as Putin's in power, and nobody wants to see it like that. They want to see Putin as like this outstanding bastion for conservatism. And I'm a conservative, but like they're trying to equate Putin with Donald Trump, and it's like this has nothing to do with our political elections. I don't know. This is one of the strangest things I've ever seen. It's just one of the. The Russians thought they were going to win in 10 days, and they got mollywopped, and they didn't expect it to have what happened. Here's the ultimate expression of what's going on. The Russians are introducing their new team. Oh, this is the last part. This is a really horrible thing that happened in Russia. Russia's introducing their Sukhoi 57s, their T-90 tanks. And when they're doing so, what's happening is the T-90 tanks are getting fucking mollywopped because this is, not to get too weird here, but the loading station for the artillery for the shells is on the same level as the turret, and so the United States is selling these $500,000 javelins to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are shooting them. They come down on top of the tank, and you'll see all over the battlefield there's these Russian T-90s with the turrets popped off the top because they're igniting the shells. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? It's a design flaw. Well, now the entire world, guess what they don't want to buy anymore? Russian T-90 tanks anymore. So Russia has not only screwed themselves politically and economically, but like now their number one export, which is military hardware. Well, one of their petroleum's their number one export, but one of their top exports is military hardware. We now know their Sukhoi 57s aren't stealth. We now know their Kimzit missile is not hypersonic, and we now know that their T-90 tanks can't stand up to anyone else's tanks. So because of that, they've crippled themselves economically. This is they've wasted a ton of resources, and realistically, unless NATO relents, they're never going to take Kiev. And so I was told when this war started, I was told by everyone, dude, Kiev is going to fall. It's going to be a matter of minutes. And I was like, bro, what happens 3 years from now? We're at 2 years now. What happens 3 years from now when Kiev hasn't fallen? What happens now? Like when you think about from Putin's standpoint, if he doesn't take Kiev, he might die. I don't think people understand that. Like it is not a situation where he's like, oh, fuck, I fucked up. I'll just pull out. Everything's fine. The infrastructure that keeps Putin in office, that infrastructure will swallow him. Does that make sense? So he's literally fighting for his life right now. When they annexed Crimea, there was like a 74% approval rate in Russia. When they now in this invasion of Ukraine, the rest of Ukraine, it's like 14%. And now it's dropping. And I have friends leaving Russia in droves because they do not want to get conscripted into the army to fight this this idiotic war that easily could have been avoided if Russia had chosen to base their economy on something other than petroleum. Now, get ready because there's going to be a bunch of fucker comments in this video. And it's going to buy these bots, these people who are literally, we just found out. Did you see the whole thing where Russia has been paying U.S. Content creators? Russia has been paying, look at, just Google it.
TikTok?
Yeah, TikTok. Streamers. Russia has been paying these American streamers. Tim Pool actually admitted like he'd been getting paid. Yeah, they've been.
How much did he get paid?
There's $10 million that people had been admitting to being paid. But if you want to Google that right now,
Google that, please. That's insane.
And so Russia had been paying American streamers to sort of like change the narrative. Guys, I'm not saying this because I'm anti-Russia or pro-Ukraine. I've never visited either one of those places.
You should, by the way.
I definitely will. Like from what you explained to me about Kiev, I'm absolutely going to go visit. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm a retired U.S. military officer, and this is the stupidest land invasion I've ever seen. This is the most point. When Hitler invades Russia, I understand why he did it. Now, it was a colossal failure, but it wasn't in the beginning. And then when Napoleon invades Russia, that was pretty stupid too. It was a colossal failure, but he actually took Moscow.
Yeah.
So those are pretty stupid, but those weren't pointless. This one is utterly pointless. This is utterly and completely pointless. The idea that the United States and NATO are just going to let Kiev fall, and Kiev, what is it? It's an 8-hour drive to Berlin from Kiev, something like that.
Something like that.
So you just think that we're just gonna, like, NATO's just gonna let the Russians just put like their missiles right next to Berlin, and we're not going to say anything. Like,
but they got really close. They got really close to taking Kiev because they had to take that airfield right out of Kiev. It's like 20 minutes from where my apartment is.
Yeah.
I wasn't there, just for people to know. I was not. I happened to actually be freaking snowboarding, which saved my fucking life.
Yeah.
I was Primoz and I, we went spontaneously to Austria because it was snowing in my hometown, and 3 days in, the invasion happened. But there's an airfield right outside of Kiev, 20 minutes out, and they were this close to fucking getting it, and that was the plan was contingent on that.
Yeah.
That they got the airfield so they could get the supplies and all the extra troops, but they couldn't get it. They were this fucking close.
Yeah.
They were battling there for a handful of hours, and then they couldn't take it. And but if they had taken that, they would have toppled Kiev very quickly.
Yeah.
As to my knowledge.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. I mean, the problem is, they seemed way more prepared than the Russians were expecting. The Russians were legitimately, you saw Scott Ritter, he was going to...
No, because they didn't tell the Russians, the troops, where they were going to go.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, it will be a training exercise. Yeah. I don't know how much of that is Western propaganda, but as far as I heard, when they interview all these Russian troops, they're like, oh, we had no idea we were fighting our brothers, aka Ukrainians.
Yeah.
They told us it would be a fucking training exercise. Yeah. No shit, they weren't ready.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that they were ready. Here's what's not propaganda. Kiev is not under Russian control. That's not propaganda. That's the truth. And Russia told us they would be. That's not propaganda. That's the truth. So, that's the only thing I would tell. And as far as I'm concerned, the Sukhoi 57s are an utter and complete failure. The new stealth aircraft that the Russians had built to combat the F-22 and the F-35, they've done nothing. Absolutely. They haven't even put one into the field of combat because they know they'll get shot down. Because the Americans gave the Ukrainians Patriot missile batteries, which already shot down a Kimzat missile. So like that's incredibly problematic. It's all Russia has done is expose themselves horribly in doing this. Guys, again, I'm not saying this because I between Biden and Trump, I would vote for Trump. I'm not some liberal progressive. I'm telling you this as a retired military officer who studies war. This was a terrible, terrible, terrible miscalculation that will go down in history as one of the most pointless land invasions in history. I'm telling you, in retrospect, people are going to look back and like, Jesus, what the fuck was this guy thinking? Like, sell something other than vodka, caviar, and fucking AK-47s. Change your economy to like more of a technological updated economy, sell something other than petroleum, and maybe you don't have to invade Ukraine. But that's the situation to put themselves in.
That was part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you, because I'm like, yeah, we know you as like the party dude and social influencer networking, but I'm like, I also know a lot of shit about politics and war, and me having all these connections to Ukraine, I was like, this is going to be super interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you love it. Yeah. At least that's what it looks like.
Yes.
You love talking about it. Now, you said earlier, like China, India, and South Africa would ruin the economy.
Because they're the only people that were willing. So United States, if we want to, you see how we get our components built in Taiwan and in mainland China, and we have some built in Vietnam, right? They bid against each other. no one's going to bid against themselves. Like literally, like the United States may actually tell some of these countries, we're not going to do business with you if you do business with Russia, as long as Putin is in power. I'm using this hypothetically, and maybe Russia can do something to like dig themselves out of this, but it's never going to be the petroleum that they were selling to Germany, which is this. That's what this is all about. There's pipelines that go through Ukraine.
Yeah.
The petroleum that Russia was selling to Germany is never going to equate the economic loss of what they lost as far as, I believe they have 1,600. I'm trying to remember how many tanks that they have already in inventory. The Russians, they're going to lose all their tanks, and they're like, they have several other issues that are going on. But this is just the whole thing has just been a massive, massive disaster.
So why haven't they completely bankrupted the entire country yet? Is it because they're still living on reserves? Because you're talking about it like it just happened, but they've been clearly doing "quote unquote" well enough to prolong this war for the last 2 years.
So Russia has a military industrial complex like we do.
Yeah,
their whole country, like probably the second biggest military industrial complex of any country in the world besides the United States. They had a lot. Like they actually, I believe this is true. They actually enlisted World War II tanks back into this war. They're bringing things out of reserve to fight in these battles, right?
Okay.
And so because they're doing that, like they have like an inventory of tanks that's not endless, but it's pretty massive.
Yeah.
And I also believe that the other thing is there were points near the beginning of this war there was significant amount of fighting, and it sort of dropped back because I think the Russians understand when they take their tanks into the field of combat that so this is what I was going to tell you. The Russian tank, let's just say, is $4 million. The Javelin is, I think they've got the cost down to 200,000.
I mean, of course, yeah.
So you're trading one U.S. Javelin for a Russian tank, and it's not. There's no combat. Like,
it's not economical, yeah.
Well, it's not economical, but there's also no countermeasure for a U.S. Javelin. That the Russians don't have a countermeasure for it. So, because of that, you've got to a point where the Russians are like not. There's no intent of like invading Kiev at this point, and so now they're just in a place where they can never. The other problem is this: Russia. They're losing, and they are losing. They're losing because they're losing more money, and they're also losing more people.
Yeah.
But they can never go to the negotiating table saying, we'd like to negotiate and get out of this. Like, don't get me wrong, Putin will say those words, but they'll never go to the negotiating table because it will let the world know that they know they're losing. Yeah. And they're never going to do that.
Yeah.
It's just, this is one of these problems where Ukraine is literally fighting for its life. Like, it's not, people don't understand this. Ukrainians in Kiev don't speak Russian. They speak Ukrainian. Like, imagine if Mexico was going to invade the United States. It would be bad enough, but like now a country where people don't even speak the same language as you is now invading your country. How hard would you fight for your own independence?
Yeah.
So you're asking Ukrainians to just lay down and be taken over by Russians.
They're never going to do it.
They're never going to do that. And then you're confused why they're not going to do endless. You see these people on the right, they're like, end this needless war. I'm like, bitch, let Mexico invade Texas and then tell the people in San Antonio to end this needless war.
Yeah.
It's stupid. Ukraine, I agree if people say the United States should not be giving this much money to NATO. I'm fine with that. What I have a problem with is people saying that Ukraine doesn't have the right to defend itself. Shut the fuck up. Yeah, no, Ukraine has every right to defend itself. I don't care what you think about Zelensky or what his religion is, or whether or not there's fucking whoever the SS is running the military, whatever story you got to make up. Ukraine has the right to defend itself. Yeah. Okay. And if you want to say Russia has the right to invade, sure. Or you could say Russia has the right to invade. But like the idea that Russia invaded and then didn't realize that NATO was going to help Ukraine, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that for not recognizing what was going to happen here? It's Russia's fault. It's no one else's fault, which is why I go back to my original supposition, which is this will go down as the dumbest land invasion in the last 500 years. This is because it's pointless. This is utterly, there's no way they'll end up making, you already had Sevastopol, you already had fucking Crimea. There was no reason for you to take. Now, obviously, the reason why they wanted to create a land bridge in the southern part of Ukraine to connect Moldova to the Russian Federation. That's why they wanted to do that, but like it's not going to happen. So now what are you going to do, right? And the thing is, people will come on and they'll debate me on this, and it's just it's so obvious that they have not done any study on this or have any concept of the fact that, well, okay, I'm going to say something right now. You want to really piss off the audience?
No, let's go.
Finland right now could invade Moscow with impunity, and Moscow could do nothing about it. Finland has their first squadron of F-35s coming. You tell me what in the Russian arsenal can stand up to an F-35. The answer is nothing. So because Finland joined NATO after Russia told them not to, Finland now has air supremacy and air superiority over Russia. Tell me what part of that is wrong. You want to come, dude, I'll do a live stream and humiliate anyone who wants to come on. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force officer. I flew Spec Ops for 5 years. You are a moron if you don't understand what just happened. Russia just got dunked. But the problem is what Russia couldn't have happened is Ukraine get F-35s. If Ukraine joins NATO and then all of a sudden they start putting U.S. armaments inside of Ukraine, then Russia is like triple fucked. The problem is that they've been triple fucked for 30 years and they just didn't realize it. So that's the other issue. The Finland thing is the most hilarious thing. Is Finland stood up to Russia, got everything they wanted, and now they have a squadron of the world's most superior, technologically advanced fighters in the entire world. Their fighters, I don't even know if I'm supposed to know this, but their pilots are training in Wichita Falls, Texas. That's where we have Shepherd Air Force Base. We have fighter pilots from other countries train in the United States.
I have a friend of mine who's there.
Yeah, at Shepherd Air Force Base. Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's but he's in Texas, and he's like, he went to school with me. I met him at the fucking gym in Austria.
Yeah, we didn't even have this discussion beforehand. But yes,
this guy's huge, and he used to train in special forces in Austria. And I'm like, "What's up, man? What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to the States to train a fighter pilot." I'm like, "I think this guy's full of shit."
Yeah.
But I see him on the stories. He's in fucking Texas. Yeah. And now I've asked friends that like, oh, no way they're being trained in the U.S. But now you telling me that there's foreign fighters training in the U.S.
So foreign tank commanders train at the National Training Center at Fort Irwin in Barstow, California. But the foreign pilot, so we'll sell other countries are F-16s, F-16s, F-15s, and F-18s, F-22. We don't sell F-22s. F-22s are only American. And F-35s, when we have to train their pilots in order to sell, when they sell it to them, we train their pilots at Wichita Falls, Texas, at Shepherd Air Force Base. Yeah,
interesting.
So that's where that's happening. And it's just so funny when I have these discussions with people, and they're like, "No, did you see that Russia banned trans people? Therefore, Russia's good." It's like I understand what Russia's doing, and I'm not necessarily against that. But my point is, like, that doesn't make I just don't know how this became a political thing.
Yeah.
And one more thing that's going to piss off your audience. Ready?
Let's go.
Okay. If you believe that had Donald Trump been the president for the last 4 years and Ukraine invaded Russia, that Donald Trump was going to do nothing to aid Ukraine, you're a fucking idiot. Of course he was. Again, people don't understand that Kiev is 8 hours from Berlin. When they think of Kiev, they think of Russia and that area. Yeah. They don't think of Europe.
No, it's more Europe.
It's Europe. They don't see the idea that Poland and Germany are members of NATO and that Donald Trump was just going to sit by while Kiev fell to the Russians and do nothing to help them. I know Donald Trump right now is using this as his soapbox to say, oh, Biden's wrong. He's given all this money to Ukraine, and I would have never done that. He's lying. And you want to know something else? If Joe Biden had not won the election, he would be then saying, do you see Donald Trump's leading us into a war with Russia? These whole positions would have been flipped. It's just politics. I don't care that you're being sold to, but know that you're being sold to.
Yeah.
You're being lied to by both sides right now.
Always.
Yeah,
always
of course. Whoever is in power who leads the war charge, the other side is going to say, you're leading us into a pointless war. And then it's always been like that. It's always been like that. So just don't be fooled into thinking that somehow, now, would they have given as much money as Biden? Hell no. I think the Trump administration would have given less money to NATO than Biden has, but they definitely would have aided. They probably wouldn't have given a squadron of F-16s, but all those Javelin missiles, I can tell you absolutely they would have given them.